Hello and welcome to the Harry Trough, a place where Mum and Dad spent many happy times supporting the mighty Lions. So on behalf of me, Susie, Janny and Max, welcome to a celebration for Bob. Unfortunately, we're still operating under these strict government guidelines, but by using a QR code, we were able to get the numbers up to the exact number of people who are here today. So it's just really cool. In the event that you need to have logged in, I'm sure you've all done that, but in the event that a government official comes to measure the place and count heads, I'd ask anybody under the age of 21 to run like buggery to the other side, and we'll look after the rest. And now there are hand sanitisers around, so please use those, and feel free to move a metre or so away from whoever's next to you if you're concerned. I think we can now welcome the Zoom crew, because this has been Zoom, the celebration is being watched by people around the globe. So welcome to all of those people. I'm sure I'll need reminding at some stage, but today is not a sad day, but a day to celebrate the good times we had with him and the many special qualities of Bobby. The husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather and great friend to us all here. For those not familiar with their surroundings here, and I don't reckon there could be any of them, but there are toilets to the right there. If you could just check that your phone is turned off or onto silent, we'd be grateful. And then we'll begin. We'll start by hearing some reflections from Dad's cousin, Max Ellis, who couldn't be here today. And then the four of us will give, or is it deliver, a eulogy. Following that, there'll be a few brief tributes and a little bit of singing for those who are musically talented. And then you'll get a well-earned drink. So we'll get going. Now here's Max.
Well, hello to all the Loder family and all of Bob's friends gathered for this happy farewell. And hello to Bob and Roo too, because though I'm not even vaguely religious, I'm sure they're here somewhere with us somehow. Maybe something like I'm doing at the moment. Sorry, I couldn't make it in person. But then Bob was such a polished performer, I'm sure he'll find a way, provided it doesn't involve email. Well, we spent the war years in Melbourne, and though Bob was some 10 years older than I was, the Ridge, Auntie Jean, Uncle Louie, Yan, Bob and John played a pretty prominent part in our lives. Particularly my memories of Ross. The older Loder boys were always so grown up to us, junior members of the assorted Maxwell family, but you always looked after us littlies. But then, the fact that we moved back to Canberra and the families intervened, and though we were always close, we didn't see that much of each other. We didn't really become close again until the late 80s, when I headed off to Melbourne with the proposal for a new type of rural publication. Thank God for family connections. One of my first calls was to Bob and his boss Rex Glennon. And for some issues, Galgetti's Grascos helped support our finances, while RMB, as it was called, told some 200,000 people what a great crew you were. Strong mutual benefits, all right, but a huge one from my point of view. I'd re-establish contact again with Bob. Bob, I'm sure you'll remember my next visit to Ross with my grandsons, Finn and Jude, who with all our family send their love. Finn, aged about 12, found an old mesh trap. After catching a crow in the paddock, he vowed he'd catch a fox overnight. And sure enough, we sceptical grown-ups were wakened at the crack of dawn by the boys' triumphant yells over the snarling of the trapped fox. Bob, in the face of such rampant animal conservationism, had to give Finn the nod, and the fox escaped to raid someone else's chickens another day. One last encounter updates my picture of you, Bob. In late 2015, you and I thought we'd like to rediscover the beachside mansion in Brighton, owned by our grandmother's family, the Russell Rosses. With your direction, we found the short street all right, and for the next hour or so conducted a critical assessment of a huge luxury house in the last stages of an intensive renovation, with the builder hovering around providing details of costs and materials. When we were finally ushered off the premises, we discovered to our horror the street number was wrong, and our ancestral pile was on the other side of the street. We sneaked over to have a look and met the real inheritors of Bonnelly. Bob charmed them, of course, and the rest is history. Bob, just a couple of examples of laughs we shared, not long in terms of lifetimes, but memories I carry with me forever, along with all the love and respect we shared and the admiration I had for you and all your family. Thank you for giving us so much to remember you by. I might sound a trifle light-hearted, Bob, but don't worry, I will miss you all right, my favourite cousin. But I won't say goodbye yet. Just hang about and we'll have a good catch-up in a few years. I can just see you now, surrounded by scraps of paper with serious family history questions on your lips, like, did David Skinner Maxwell, our great-grandfather, really write a book called Stepping Stones to Socialism in 1891? Well, just before he died in December, I got an envelope with a moving poem by David Romano called When Tomorrow Starts Without Me. There was a pink stickered note on the cover from you saying, Max, this is why I am hoping that tomorrow will start without me very soon. Well, Bob, I'm so pleased that you got your wish not so long after writing this note. It's a bit like you once described Mekwa to me. You wouldn't choose to stay there, but if there's no alternative, it's definitely the best place to be. So if you have to go, well, with your family beside you, a great life to celebrate, as you often proclaim, and a peaceful and comfortable departure. What more could anyone wish for? P.S. Hope the pearly gates were the right ones, Bob, and not the gates to Melbourne Botanical Gardens. But then, I'm sure Ruth would have been waiting for you and made sure you found the right ones.
Thanks, Max. Thought we were going to hear it again.
He's on his own. He's listening.
I know. I would love to have heard it again. In his own words, Dad had a long and marvellous life. Robert Edward Loder was born on the 13th of November 1926, the second son of Jean and Louis. Dad was born at home in the rich Canterbury, which is where he lived for the next 23 years. He had an older brother, Ian Maxwell, known in the family as Jan, and later, in 1931, a younger brother, John Louis, was born. Although childhood was spent through the Great Depression and the Second World War, Bob had only happy memories. He was nurtured by loving parents, grandparents, and extended family members who instilled in him a great social consciousness, and he certainly learnt the values of kindness, generosity, and frugality, which we're struggling with today sometimes. From an early age, Ross, the small family farm in the Yarra Valley owned by his grandparents, played an important part in Dad's life. In a letter written to his family whilst overseas with the Navy in 1946, a very sentimental Bob, and he was a very sentimental person, claims that there could be no inheritance in the world worth even 1/10 of the value of his childhood memories. In the letter he pleads,
don't ever sell Ross, Granny. I want my children to know the sounds of the lonely pines sighing in a warm summer's night and the careless singing of the birds in the morn. I want them to learn to harness a horse and to milk a cow and to snip timber. I want to see them dragged from stable to bale by a frantic calf and ride and fall off, to chop wood and cut ferns and grub trees, to show them how to build wigwams, to help them pick blackberries and to show them where to find maidenhair, fern, and take them swimming in the river. I want them to know the joy of getting up early on a cold, clear morning and going for long walks in the sweetly scented bush, and the excitement of looking for eggs in the fowl house, and the satisfaction of filling the space under the house with firewood.
Bob goes on to thank his parents and grandparents and extends his thanks to his Uncle Bob for his unfailing patience, kindness and generosity, as well as his captivating yarns of the outback. He concludes that this is from 3 very lucky blokes, being sure that his brothers would agree with his sentiments. From a young age, Bob's own kindness to others was evident. When his younger brother John was only 6, Jean and Louis were away, and Bob heard John whimpering in the night. Bob brought him into his bed and comforted him until morning. John was then taken to the doctor and diagnosed with polio. In the true Loder style, John's condition was dealt with stoically. His older brothers pushed him around in a converted pram, and he was constantly told what a lucky boy he was by his mother. Consequently, with this positive reinforcement, he never really felt disabled. Jean and Louis and the 3 boys enjoyed evenings around the fire, listening to the radio and gramophone and reading books and poetry. Bob grew up with a love for literature. He learnt many poems by heart and remembered them to his dying day.
Bob was very proud of his father Louis, who was a highly intelligent and ethical man, later knighted for his services to engineering. Louis shared his great love of Gilbert and Sullivan with the family. On Wednesday nights, productions were half-price entry for servicemen, so the family would all attend, the boys in their cadet uniforms. Later in aged care, Bobby greatly enjoyed watching Gilbert and Sullivan DVs. In fact, not long before he died, he told me he only had 2 things to look forward to. One was the next one-day match of India versus Australia, or whatever it was, and the other was Gilbert and Sullivan on Friday afternoon. And he could, this is in the notes, stand by, he could recite, it was quite amazing, if you know Gilbert and Sullivan like her, but he could recite verses of Gilbert and Sullivan verbatim at the age of 94. Quite extraordinary.
Oh, that's you.
School days began for young Bob, aged 6, at Carey Grammar, which was in walking distance of his home in the Ridge. When he was 11, he started at his father's old school, Wesley College. He loved Wesley, where he made many precious friends and lifelong friends, including Ian Duncan, David Chancellor, George Bickford, Lex Stubbs, Heifer Hibbins, and many more. He loved English at school, but described himself as quite poor in other subjects. His English teacher, V.K. Brown, got the boys to hand in a composition each Friday. The first one for the year, Dad was given 9 out of 10. Then, every week thereafter, he got 10 out of 10, until the final week when VK marked his paper with 11 out of 10. So his average for the year would be a perfect 10 out of 10. Bob excelled at sports, and in his final year at school was captain of athletics. That year at the APS Sports, he won the 880, and also in a very, very memorable race, he won the prestigious mile event. On the following Monday, the heading in the Argus read, "Loder's Mile wins PS Sports for Wesley."
As a teenager, Bob grew vegetables in the back garden of the Ridge. He would get his mother to weigh his produce so he could calculate how much money he was saving the family. Ever frugal. It was during his school years, when she was 16 and he was 17, that he met the love of his life, Ruth Archer. He only took out 2 or 3 other girls, and only when Rue wasn't available. One girl let him kiss her goodnight on the first date. Second time round, she shook him firmly by the hand and said, "I've given up kissing boys." Rue never said no to Bobby's kisses, and they were together for 76 years, 70 of these as man and wife.
Bob left school at the end of 1944 and joined the Navy in January of 1945. He was sent to officer school and certainly looked very dashing in his uniform. I'm sure he snaps there with his trademark pipe. By the time his training had finished, the war was over, but Dad remained with the HMAS Shropshire and sailed to England for the victory celebrations. He left the Navy at the end of 1946. After the war, ex-servicemen who had matriculated were given a free university place. Why Dad didn't do arts is a mystery to us, because that was clearly his strongest subject. Perhaps his childhood experiences of farming with Uncle Bob at Ross influenced him, but he joined the Ag Science faculty, and despite struggling with maths and physics, he managed to get his degree in 4 years. He once told me that it took him 4 years to pass first year physics. Whilst at university and with Roo at the kindergarten training college, Bob and Roo spent many happy times at Ross with other young couples. Bob's old school friend David Chancellor, who's sitting with us today, hooked up with Roo's friend Phil Holder on a blind date, and the two couples became lifelong friends.
Bob married Roo at the Wesley College Chapel on December the 21st, 1949, at the end of his third year university, so he actually completed his degree with Mum financing him. A year later, they bought their first property at 50 Liston Street, Burwood. David Chancellor drew up the plans for the house, and Roo's father, George Archer, built it for them. Soon after completing the house, they bought the adjoining block. Dad grafted hundreds of triple-budded citrus trees, lemon, orange and grapefruit, using his ag science skills. He was planning to sell these and made his first million, but unfortunately that was not to be. And so the nursery was dismantled, a tennis court was built on the block, and thus began many happy years of mixed doubles on a Sunday afternoon with friends.
After finishing his Ag Science degree, Bob took a job with the Agricultural Department for about 8 months, but found the work boring, so he left to join GrasCos. He loved GrasCos and worked there for the next 30 years. He enjoyed his work in Tasmania and Victoria so much that he refused a promotion that would have meant moving the family to Sydney. Dad's priority was the stability of the family on the home front in Melbourne. Bob had great respect and affection for his colleagues at GrasCos. Diana Figgis, daughter of the Managing Director Peter Figgis, corresponded with Dad right up until the time of his death, and said recently how much she will miss his letters. Dad's job involved a lot of public relations work, wooing farmers to buy more merchandise and shearing more sheep with GrasCos. He became friends with many of the clients and really looked forward to his trips up the bush. He seemed to know every sheep property in Victoria and Tasmania and how many sheep they shore.
Bob and Roo's 4 children were all born in the 1950s. Susan Marie, 52, followed by Janet Patricia, 54. Now, this was fine. He was quite happy with his blue-eyed and brown-eyed princesses, but oh joy! In February 56, a boy, Richard Maxwell, followed by more joy from Timothy Maxwell in 1958. Maybe it was being raised in an all-boys family and attending an all-boys school, or perhaps he read literature advocating male supremacy, but Bobby definitely believed that life was not really fulfilled without boy babies. In 1960, Bob and Roo and the children moved to 4 Fairview Grove, Glen Iris, and this was the beginning of 25 memorable and very happy years. Bobby built another tennis court, another vegetable garden, and another chook house. The Wilson family next door became close friends, so much so that when the fence between the 2 properties needed replacing, it was removed altogether. The Nexties introduced Bob and Roo to a whole new group of friends, and they enjoyed a great social life together.
I was so engrossed with the story. I haven't heard it before. Here we go. Fairview Grove days were happy family days with beer brewing, bulk cheap wine bottling, tennis, holidays at Ross, Rosebud and later Bunga. The day started with breakfast, where Dad sat behind his newspaper and was waited on by Roo, who actually every now and then, as we were four of us all, doing our stuff, she'd say, "Bob, can't you do something?" Quiet, kids. Totally useless. He then headed off to work by train or carpool or to the bush for a couple of nights on business. When he came home after work, he'd pour a sherry for Roo at 6 o'clock on the knocker. And most of the time, we never start drinking in our house before 6 because of that. Although the children say it's 6 o'clock somewhere in the world. And we'd all sit down for dinner together, and then he'd help Mum with the dishes while we did our homework.
I have memories of Dad at the Corowa Junior School Sports Carnival. Our tall, dark and handsome father always won the father's race. In fact, he won it so many times they changed the prize from a packet of cigarettes to a pouch of tobacco as Bob smoked the pipe. The two girls were both married off age 20, one to a Wesley boy, tick, and one to a farmer, tick. The two boys married lovely girls who produced a daughter each, and luckily, sons, to carry on the family name. So all was well in Bobby's world.
Bob and Roo now had times in their life to travel. They made regular trips to Tassie to visit the Marshalls, had a regular overseas trips to Bali, Europe and beyond, and enjoyed Port Douglas and the Australian outback with their travelling companions, the Wallies. In 1985, Bob and Roo bought the Tux house at Gypsy Point. Roo enjoyed the fishing, and Bobby enjoyed reading his book and just keeping out of the way. In semi-retirement, Bob and Roo spent half their lives in the city and the rest of the week at Ross. Bobby had some very innovative and unorthodox farming methods for somebody who studied ag science. At shearing time, he and his sheepdog, Roo, would hold up a tennis net to muster the sheep into the yards, with often disastrous results. They also did a lot of entertaining there, including an annual golf tournament on the Royal Ross golf course, and Keita Wilson gave them this a beautiful silver cup, which was the Fairview Cup, which is still up at Ross. Bobby had a veggie garden cranking, and on their way home on Sunday afternoons, they would drop into all of us with some of the produce from the veggie garden.
In 1987, Bob and Roo moved to Mona Place, South Yarra. Dad had a fabulous office halfway up the grand staircase. He had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves to house his much-loved books and a large desk with filing drawers under the window. He loved this office, and it was quite possibly the first time in his life that he had a room which was entirely his own. He was now working only a few days a week for Dalgetty's, who'd merged with Roscos, and so had time to research family history, and he transcribed his grandmother's diary. In 2003, Bob and Roo moved to Kooyong Road, and they were winding down, and Dad was fully retired. Again, he had an office in the sunroom with his big desk and bookshelves, which now displayed many photos of the 12 grandchildren. Bob and Roo hosted soirees on the first Thursday of every month, where any family member was welcome to come for a drink and a catch-up. Bobby provided the cheap, perfectly good wine, and Louis offered a great variety of savouries, including asparagus rolls, smoked oysters, and cheese crispies.
At Christmas 2005, Dad suffered a stroke and heart failure. He was at Ross, and Mum drove him to Melbourne and Reed took him to Cabrini. He very nearly died and went on to have his mitral valve replaced. In intensive care, where I think he spent 6 weeks from memory, he was in a coma attached to several life-saving machines, with Janny and Roo sitting beside him watching the Boxing Day test. Janny remarked that she wasn't really interested because she didn't know any of the players, and Mum agreed, and then from the depths of the bed, this unconscious person said, "You've heard of neuromethamphetamine, haven't you?" Quite a shock. It was the first of the extraordinary recovery, extraordinary and totally unexpected recovery. It was really hard for him because he had to learn to write again and to walk again. He wasn't able to drive. He had to give up tennis. and he had to give up having a bath, which he just loved. It showed huge strength of character and devotion to Rui that he managed this rehabilitation.
Dad never embraced the technology of the internet, but was hugely impressed by what Peter W. would Google for him. He thought it was magic. He was confused by his gay grandchildren, but totally embraced their same-sex partners and was completely besotted with his first IVF great-grandchild. And bonus, it was a boy.
Bit of a theme happening there. In 2016, Bob and Roo moved to Mecwa. Dad fiercely protected his right to do everything for his Roo, which used to drive me crazy. Nobody could butter the toast right to the edges the way she liked it, and for that matter, nobody could do anything else as well as he could. He managed his own fading memory by writing copious lists. Our favourite was the list of 17 things he did for Mum in the mornings. 1, kiss Roo on the lips to see she's still alive. 2, turn on the TV. I won't read out the rest of the other 15. He also had his what to do before bowls list, which I think, here we go. Number 1 was have a pee at noon. Good one.
As Mum disappeared into her own little world, Dad had to keep himself entertained with his photo albums, family history, papers and letters. He was able to borrow a desk from Sal's mum, Betty Evans, a beautiful old roll-top desk that just fitted into the bedroom, and he had drawers for everything in it. He kept every letter he's received in his life, and I'm not exaggerating, I've got them. It is extraordinary, the level of detail that he kept. He looked forward to bowling each week with the MCC, where he caught up with old school friends and others. And even though he struggled a bit and he had to use a stick, some weeks he would say to me, "Oh, it was hopeless today," and other weeks he'd say, "I actually bowled quite well today." So he did get enough enjoyment from it, and he enjoyed the social aspect of it enormously.
The blue book, so-called, was a diary, and every year we had to buy the exact same model, and we transcribed all the important names and things, and there was one lady who works behind the back holding her hands and her name. He had all these descriptions because he liked to use people's names, and he used so that he could engage them in conversation, and he'd ask them questions to make them feel more at home. Dad wrote many letters over the years, phone calls being expensive. Janny would get munchy time letters, which I assume he wrote at lunchtime because he wouldn't have done it on the boss's time, from the Grascos office. The last letter he wrote to her is here on the screen on this A4 bit of paper, but of course he's only used a quarter of it because you wouldn't waste sending the rest of the bit of paper that was blank. And he was just thanking Janny for a letter she'd written him. He was also always incredibly grateful, and he also, the envelope, luckily Australia Post didn't stamp the stamp, so Janny's going to reuse it.
We've all inherited a bit of Bobby. Recently, Dad received a lovely letter from his youngest grandson, Rory, from London, and I quote, "While we are all deeply saddened by Rui's death, it will be a gentle reminder of the love in our lives that we share. I hope it brings you some comfort, and I say it with great pride that I plan to propose to Ashley imminently. In her, I find the love that you no doubt shared with Rui, and I'm excited to one day present her as the next Mrs. Loder." Bobby derived great pleasure from the news of their engagement. After Mum died, Dad was determined not to be glum or to burden others with his grief. He believed if everyone could give a smile, the world would be a happier place. We were all lucky enough to spend precious time with Dad before he died. He was so loving and grateful and always more considerate of others than himself. Bless you, Bobby. Your legacy lives on.
I've been instructed to hold the microphone a bit closer to my mouth. I just have a brief tribute to Bobby. Here we go.
You can do it
No,
now.
I can do it.
You can do it.
Bob was a very special person. Through his unwavering positive attitude to life, his kindness, generosity, tolerance and compassion, he provided us all with a shining example of how we should live our lives. He never got angry. The clear-minded way he dealt with problems ensured that he would always find a rational and sensible solution. He was always there to offer sage advice to those who needed it. He was the voice of reason. Even when it came to dying, his attitude was rational and pragmatic. After Rui's death, he really felt that it was time for his self-proclaimed wonderful life to come to an end. His body and mind were failing him, and he could see no reason to continue living. He died content and utterly satisfied that it was time to depart. Respect for others was a hallmark of Bobby's character. He held no prejudices and accepted all people at face value. He loved to engage with people and formed many enduring friendships with people from all the different phases of his life. His relationship with Rue was one of complete devotion. We've long considered what we might say at Bobby's send-off and joked about the abundance of material, the mountain of funny anecdotes generally relating to frugality. A particular favourite is the old yellow bucket at Gypsy Point, which had on it a small, handwritten sticky label that read, "This bucket has a hole in it." The logic was sound, not ideal for carrying water or paint, but perfectly adequate for collecting leaves out of the gutters. So, of course, no good reason to throw it out. There wasn't much that Bobby threw out, including, it would appear, every letter that he ever received in his 94 years. There is one letter in particular that has surfaced recently that I'd like to read today. It was written by his mother, Jean, on the eve of his 21st birthday. It's a touching tribute to a fine young man who went on to become a much loved and respected father, grandfather and great-grandfather.
Well done.
The letter is dated 8:20 a.m. Wednesday, November the 12th, 1947, the day before Bobby's birthday, 21st birthday. Bless you, my darling. You are stepping forth into adulthood with courage, love for mankind in your heart, and a sense of the high adventure of living. I think that there were mostly good fairies at your christening, and one rather rare gift they brought I don't want you to lose. The power to see the best in everyone and every situation. The will to extract the greatest possible good from every situation in which you find yourself. And a love of simple things. Keep that. You are certainly starting your manhood surrounded by much love, and perhaps it isn't a bad omen that you're currently tackling the difficult patch of your life. It's very easy to wish for one's children nothing but a pleasant path, but I know that isn't what I really want for you. No worthwhile life is built without difficulties. I remember thinking when you were nearly born, I can't possibly bear this. If there were only a precipice handy, I'd jump over. What a good thing there wasn't, and I didn't deserve to be rewarded for such cowardly sentiments so richly. Nobody ever had a better son, darling. I can honestly say that I don't think you've ever given us a moment's anxiety. I hope someday you'll know the joy of parenthood we've had in having you for our son.
I think now we have probably the grand finale.
Bobby, 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 Bobby. We're here to toast your 94 great years. Bobby, 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 Bobby. We'll We'll celebrate despite shedding some tears. Your wisdom is beyond compare, your smiling eyes and tufts of hair, a patriarch to this marvelous family. Your reminiscing never tired, your hearing aids were never wired. We're sure gonna miss you, Bobby. You loved a glass of cheap red wine, frustrated minutes were hard to find. Your disc was always blue, Bobby. And we have come to understand how you were such a generous man. Homegrown veggies, smashed serviettes, Bobby, 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 Bobby. We're here to toast your 94 great years, Bobby, 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 Bobby. We'll celebrate and raise a glass in cheers. You saved power when you boiled the kettle so we could get ahead and settle, giving all of us a head start. Thanks, Bobby. You loved your family proud as punch, told everyone we're a handsome bunch. We think you're a little biased, Bobby. You're the kindest cat man we've come to know, and lately it's been hard to show just how much we miss you, Bobby. You'll live on in our daily lives, your frugal ways, it's no surprise. Your teachings are passed down the lines. So now we force to farewell you, and you're off to find your true love brood. We hope you've got your memories last, Bobby. Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. We're here to toast your 94 great years, Bobby, 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 Bobby. We'll always love you evermore, Bobby, 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 Bobby. We're here to toast your 94 great years.